When you pick no sides or where you're in the middle, whenever there's an election, whenever there's a controversial topic, both sides hate you because both sides feel like you're the left think you're right, the right think you're left, and no matter how you try to balance this, it's never perfect.
Hi everybody, welcome to the content category. I'm super excited to be here with Joey. Joey is the CEO of the News Lens. Joey, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks everyone.
Well, why are we having this conversation? We looked at well over 1,000 companies within the content category. It was pretty overwhelming, but one of the companies that really stood out to us was the News Lens. The News Lens, their approach to creating news content in a way that's a combination of both taking the traditional method of creating content, really making it more engaging, more unique, and also following the trends of combining quality journalism with short form content. It's really impressive, and how they carry themselves over time has been fantastic. And we'll probably get into it a little bit later. They're no longer just a media company. They have many other business units now as well. So it's pretty impressive. But Joey, maybe to start off with, we'll just jump directly into the visual that you have, so the audience at least has a little bit of a baseline understanding of who is the News Lens. Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds good. Can you guys see the screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. So yeah, here's a rough history of the company. So the company is roughly about 7 years old as we speak. The original idea was to start from Taiwan, but eventually Greater China and hopefully one day the global Chinese audience to be one of the largest high quality, objective, no sensational bias, no corporate agenda, to be as fair and balanced as possible. So basically an ideal for independent media and to be that ideal for the global Chinese speaking market. So we started from Taiwan, but there's now offices in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and as you can see from the slide, we also have a Southeast Asia edition and an international English edition. Our traffic jumped every time there was a substantial political event that the young people, the young readers would be more curious about. For example, the Hong Kong protests or all the recent geopolitical events going on in this region. So I think we're known as being one of the more trusted, safe content platforms of which to get your news and in-depth reports, because again, we're independent. We're not owned by any conglomerate or any corporate that has a political conflict of interest to push you in some different direction. So that was the original DNA, and we grew rapidly in the first 4 years, and we launched our different editions. We launched our arts and culture edition. We started winning some international journalism awards, and starting around 2017, we started going into tech. So we launched our first live streaming, so our video content, our podcast content. We launched our own first lifestyle sub-brand called Every Little D. The D stands for detail. And you can see at the very bottom left of the slide that we started getting some rewards. Getting some awards in data analytics. So we realized that as independent media, and we're getting more and more brands, more and more readers, we were gradually, organically forming a more and more complete database, allowing us to do data analytics. So we became one of the largest independent news companies around 2017. And we realized that it was probably time to start growing besides internationally, but also vertically. So something that makes us a little bit famous in the Taiwan or Greater China context is that we started doing multiple acquisitions, on average, maybe one acquisition every 3 to 6 months, starting 2018. So our first acquisition was Inside, kind of like the TechCrunch of Taiwan or the TechCrunch of Greater China. And right after that, we bought one of the largest independent sports medias called Sports Vision. So you can see over there, Series C funding. So Series C funding was the bulk of it was actually meant for the ongoing acquisitions at that time. By 2019, we bought a Cool 3C, which is essentially the former Taiwan Engadget. So we bought a gadget media. And EK2A was a big data market research firm. So that was our first foray into officially doing data analytics and market research. So we bought a big data market research firm and we actually rebranded it. So on our site, that's known as TNLR. The R stands for research. Last year in 2020, we acquired AD2. AD2 is the largest mobile ad tech company in Taiwan. So we diversified into mobile ad tech, MarTech. They coincidentally had their own media for them to kind of beta test their media and ad tech products called Agent Movie. It's kind of like the IMDb of Taiwan. So that came with their own media vertical. Second half of last year, we bought one of the largest government communications firms in Taiwan to kind of beef up our existing government communications clients. And just end of December, early January, we launched DataX, which is our own in-house AI CDP company to organize, identify, and monetize all of the data that we're starting to gather. I think you can get a feel from the last 5 or 6 acquisitions. The first 3 were still part of the media story. We were expanding our offerings, truly becoming a media group, and also at the same time kind of completing our data scale. And the second half of the story, the mobile ad tech, the big data market research, the AI CDP, that was to truly start growing complementary tech and data services surrounding and also in a sense protecting independent media. They would be the ones that gets access to more first-party data that we have, allowing them to run their products and their algorithms more efficiently, more targeted, and of course monetized easier. Going forward, because of GDPR, the California privacy laws, etc., first-party data is going to become increasingly valuable and also increasingly rare. So we believe the future of, I guess, media or platforms is that we now no longer see ourselves as just a Taiwan-based independent news company or a greater China media group. The idea is over the past year and a half, we've been slowly diversifying into hopefully one of the largest one-day global Chinese market content, plus tech service, plus data analytics platforms. And that is how we believe it will be complementary. It will allow the monetization products to make money more easily, while at the same time protecting editorial independence, because these other business models have no interest to actually interfere with editorial independence, but they need the access to those readers. So it's complementary, and both will hopefully thrive going forward. So yeah, that's in a nutshell kind of our history over the past 7 years. These are just a quick shot of our more famous investors. We have investors from the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Media Development Fund, and 500 startups from Silicon Valley. Lion Rock is a private equity group from Singapore. And starting Series C, when we started realizing that we're going to go into tech and data platforms, we were fortunate enough to invite Steve Chen from YouTube, people from Twitch, Amazon Ring, Google Nest, IoT companies. So we were trying to kind of assemble almost like a who's who, both internationally, institutional wise, and also from the Asian American crowd to kind of understand what's going on from a greater China context, and also help us build out both the media part of the business, the tech part of the business, and the data platform part of the business. Just a rough idea. We have, going back to your point, Kyle, we started with immersive, very much digital storytelling content. It's meant to be in-depth. It's meant to be diverse. It's meant to be as non-judgmental as possible. So we try to report based on facts, numbers, infographics, and what actually happened. So it's meant to be, again, politically safe, no bias, no corporate agenda. That DNA spilled over to our video products that are now very, very substantial, and our podcasts. And we also have paid events, paid classes, and we launched our own ticketing service. So we also have a ticketing service and digital payments starting last year. So organically, it kind of grew and diversified. And that's how we started transitioning to complementary data and tech service and data analytics. This is a rough screenshot of our readership portfolio in terms of their profiles. So as you can imagine, over the 6 brands, a more narrow idea is that 15 to 40 digital generation. A more broader profile would be anyone between like 15 to 60 that basically is used to getting their information or news from their smartphones. You can tell from these 6 brands that we're still missing maybe 2 or 3 verticals. For example, maybe female interest, health news, and maybe business news. So we're still actively looking for potential other verticals to kind of complete that whole media part of the story, as well as remaining tech in-house capabilities that we think we will need to acquire going forward to finish that entire supply chain. Something that makes us also a little bit special is that we're considered one of the more international media startups in this region. We set up our first international office within the first year. We have 4 different editions, and because of that, already 1/3 of our traffic is outside of our home market. So, of course, Hong Kong is number 1 outside of our home market since we have an office there. And then the U.S., anywhere there's a strong overseas Chinese or Chinese market reader population. So that, of course, also includes Southeast Asia, Australia, UK, Canada, etc. So this is our traffic growth over the past 7 years. Maybe roughly half of that is organic growth, and the other half is rapidly as we do acquisitions over the past 2.5 years.
Really impressive slides. Really fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
I wanted to start general with the questions that I had, and then a little bit it's going to be catered more towards the news lens, the news content category, but feel free to apply it across your other platforms as well. I want to start off with just a simple question, which is how do you balance between quality content and also quantity? And especially in the news segment, it feels like there's always this trap of falling into the shocking content and really to drive engagement, but then losing on that quality. So how do you balance this?
Sure. So that's, I guess, built into our DNA from day one because there are 2 co-founders. So there's myself and there's my other partner. So he is the media person. I'm actually not a media person. I went to business school. So from day one, his previous experience was he was the senior editor, excuse me, for Business Weekly Taiwan, and before that for CNext. So his entire career has been on digital content. So from day one, the consensus when we started the company was he would act as a chief content officer and handle all the content. I would handle everything outside of content, operations, investments, future strategy, etc. But since the original DNA, the original ideal was to do a clean, independent, no biased, no corporate agenda startup. From day one, it was understood that I would never interfere with that part of the business. So, for example, even to this day, after 7 years, I never sit in the editorial meetings. If you come to our office right now, coincidentally, there's a 4th floor and a 5th floor. We're in the 4th and 5th floor of the building. The 4th floor is where they create the content and the products. So the IT team and the editorial team are on the 4th floor. The operations team is on the 5th floor, sales, marketing, HR, legal, that kind of thing. So I guess the running joke, the best example to explain this would be the 4th floor are the people that make sure the dream continues. They maintain the editorial independence. They make sure that they see the numbers, they understand the traffic, they understand the growth, but I can never use the numbers to push them to create non-newsworthy content. That's been the DNA from day one. I've never been in on the editorial content. Another internal joke is, I'm just half joking here, but it's kind of true. I don't think I have time to even read our content over the past couple of years. And I'm completely fine with that because I understand and respect that my partner is doing what he needs to do to maintain that ideal. So the 4th floor is the company part that makes sure the dream continues. The 5th floor, my team, is the part of the company that makes sure the dream has lunch on their tables, tomorrow. So I make sure that there is a paycheck going to feed the dream. So there's that 50-50 balance, 50-50 split from day one. So even as we acquired other media companies or we went into other revenue generation or product diversified industries, it never went against that DNA. Now, to your point, once you took, I guess what you're hinting at, and is also in many ways the problem that many other media companies have, where they need to prove growth, where they need to hit numbers, where they need to prove, a larger monthly uniques or page views every month. How do you balance that? Well, in many ways, there's the organic growth in the first few years. And if you remember from my presentation a few minutes ago, I was kind of hinting at that, where we actually did hit our peak. We did hit our peak as an independent news company within Taiwan. So we started expanding internationally, number one. And number two, we started doing acquisitions. So there are different other, I guess, strategic business ways that you could do to kind of circumvent that problem, not directly, but there are ways that you do this that do not interfere with the original editorial integrity. All the things that we did, expand internationally, acquire a sports vertical, a tech vertical, launch a lifestyle vertical, they all have the same DNA. No junky news, no sensational pieces, no page view tricking headlines. They can't do any of that. But by adding new verticals, expanding into new countries, you can still hit those growth numbers without sacrificing the original editorial ideals, if you will.
No, it makes sense. And I think, judging based on having read some of your news articles, I feel like you've definitely stayed true to that DNA, because the content is fantastic. The level of details that you go into and the ways that you explain news stories is, I think, much different than what you're starting to see now, which is this constant blast of short form content. But at the same time, I think you balance the two worlds of those who want to consume short form content with creating those shorter bullet points at the beginning of what do you need to know from the article, just simply, but then giving that option of really quality journalism. And I think it's fantastic. I'm curious from your perspective on this, because it feels like content category as a whole, but specifically news, it seems like a lot of companies really try to create content, really keep it on their platform, and then try to drive users back to their own platform. And you guys, showing on your slide, it seems like you've also created different content formats that are distributed on other platforms, in this case, YouTube and elsewhere. What is your thoughts on being able to distribute content? Are you more an advocate of keeping users on your own platform?
I think it depends on what stage you are as a media startup. So I would say for the first 2 or 3 years, as we were just starting out and no one knew who we are, then yes, we were much more open to getting our content out there just for discovery purposes, as you mentioned. In Taiwan and Hong Kong, something that made us a little bit more famous then when we started was we actually actively went out to think, for our target audience, the digital millennials, where would they most oftentimes see information, be it video content or text content? And we would actually go to look out for those partners. So for example, there was a time during those first 2 or 3 years that our video content was available. We would actually give them out for free or sign partnership agreements with the Taiwan buses, taxis, 7-Elevens, convenience stores, McDonald's, or food courts, or lobby or screens. So anywhere at all, there was a screen, and you're kind of stuck there for 30 seconds or more. We would actually go to those providers and say, why don't we sign a content partnership of which we will give you our daily news pieces for free. So that was like the first 3 years. So just take that idea and yes, initially, if there was an instant articles, the mobile, the Google accelerated mobile pages, et cetera, yes, we would be very interested for the sake of distribution. I think by the time you start getting into a more mature stage and people know who you are, then your editorial team will come over to you and start saying, yeah, they're increasingly not comfortable with the idea of basically sending out free content to everyone else. And by that point, I would say your discovery stage is probably a little bit past your as well. So you go into like that middle stage where if you had like 20 distribution partners or you were giving your content away for free, you might pick the top 5 that is actually good for your brand equity. It achieves that marketing purpose, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like you're giving away everything. So that's the middle stage. And by the later stage, once you've kind of emerged as a more established player and you're comparable to the existing legacy media players, then yeah, you start charging. For example, you launch your paid membership. You start signing deals, content deals with other partners, of which there's a revenue generation element in there. So you're not giving away your content anymore. You're actually selling your content. So going back to my revenue page, there's that 20% others. That others also includes content licensing now. So to answer your question, I would say there's not an absolute yes or no. It really depends on where you are and what you want to accomplish at each stage of your media's life cycle. When you first start out, no one cares about who you are. The point is, how do you get in front of the eyeballs as quickly, as cheaply, as efficiently as possible? So my job at that time was to sign multiple of these deals without basically spending any marketing dollars because we had no marketing budget. The joke at that time was, if you think, oh, for an average, 20-year-old student, 30-year-old, working class guy, 40-year-old, young working professional, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., 8 a.m. to midnight, when they wake up before they go to sleep, during that entire 16-day life cycle, where do they come across potential digital content? And if it's, these places, lobbies, food courts, taxis, buses, I want to be everywhere. And then you pass that stage. After a while, you go into more mature, partnership agreements with more established distribution channels. And then you go into the final stage where you start charging and doing content licensing. So it's different life cycles.
Wow. No, it's impressive how innovative you were at the very beginning, especially looking at even not just on social networks, but going into even billboards or anywhere where we saw screens.
I would say it's not innovative. It's something that forces you when you have no money as a startup. If we had like millions raised on day one, then maybe I would have thought, that the traditional way, oh yeah, sure, let's go buy advertisements, let's go buy a TV spot, and I'll burn through your money in in a week. But we had no money, so you had to think very scrappy and think, how do I get our content out there while spending basically no money at all? So it kind of forces you.
Interesting. Well, I'm curious. I want to kind of build off that point. I know you kind of already answered my question, especially in the introduction with the slides, and I like how earlier now you've kind of diversified your revenue a little bit, but it seems, especially for more of the news category or news content providers, and even in the political side, a much harder time monetizing. And I'm just curious for you, even through that evolution, what has been those business models, or what has been your monetization strategy? I'm sure it's evolved, but especially as a content provider in these categories that you operate in, what has been your monetization strategy that's kept you afloat?
Sure. Yeah. That's still a major issue. It's still one of our biggest challenges in the past 7 years. And I think similar to the last question, the answer is also in different stages. So I would say in this independent media part of the game, the first 3 years, the first 3 to 4 years, your focus is on growing readership scale. So for the first 3 or 4 years, the idea was just to get influence monthly unique numbers as high as possible every month. We didn't start hiring our first salesperson until about year 1 and year 2. So until you're 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million monthly uniques, it makes no sense to hire a full-time salesperson anyway. So you have to achieve a certain scale before you can even start thinking about monetization, unless we're talking about programmatic, where you just plug in Google and everything's automated. But the revenue from that is very, very tiny. There's no way that's going to ever sustain an actual business. So we didn't actually hire our first salesperson until, let's say, year 2. And I saw him get humiliated and insulted every day for like a year, because wherever he was cold calling, wherever he was visiting, no one knew who you were. So for the first year, you have to see that first salesperson suffer. But at the end of his first year, you're into year 3 now. So some people, the early adopters, probably know who you are, and at that point, you might have 4 million or 5 million monthly uniques. So you're getting up there. So you start actually building the first, sales planner. You start hiring your first, sales team. You start assembling your first sales team by the year's, end of year 3, year 4. The sales team is now truly mature, and then actually really arrive in a scale of which you're comfortable with until about year 5. Now, so to your original question, throughout this whole process, one of the most common questions or pushback we would get from our clients was, "Oh, we love your target audience. We love your in-depth reports. We love the overall brand image, but as a consumer brand, as a cell phone brand, or as a cool drink brand, I don't want to buy advertorials or banners next to serious international news, the latest explosions, war. Again, since we're independent media, the idea was we only report on newsworthy content. What ended up happening is we have no fluff pieces. Everything was either serious news, international war, different photos of child prostitution, and I mean. The target advertisers liked the reach, they liked the brand image, but they do not want to buy advertising when it's so serious. No one wants to appear next to a picture of an explosion, right? So yeah, that was our biggest challenge, number one. And number two, sometimes, I guess some of the advertisers here are more spoiled. They don't actually tell you, all of our advertisements, all of our sponsored content, all of our advertorials, all have to be clearly sponsored and labeled. So anything that we took money from clients, there has to be that label on top that says this is sponsored content or client provider, something like that. We don't do anything that's technically an advertisement, but packaged as news. We can't do that. But that's actually pretty prevalent in Asia. So the advertisers here will actually tell you upfront, we like your target audience, we like your campaigns. If you label this as sponsored content, then I'll give you $10,000. If you don't label this, I'll give you $50,000. That was the second tension and the most common pushback we would get. It's easy when you're trying to make money to think, can I sell my soul? But if I don't sell my soul, you're going to lose money for the next 2 or 3 years. But if you sell your soul, you might break even within 6 months. But you can't do that. Again, this goes back to the original DNA, 50-50. I cannot take advertorials and go down to the 4th floor and tell my co-founder to, label this as news. I can't do that. So there was that split, that DNA from day one. And how do we go around this? Well, it takes time. You have to educate your advertisers. You have to get to a certain scale of which they respect the fact that you maintained that integrity over the past 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And that's also another reason why we had to quickly diversify and start acquiring other verticals, because we wanted the same reach, the same brand equity, the same brand image. But let's say now, we offer sports, we offer lifestyle, we offer tech, we offer gadgets, we offer movies. It's okay to, advertisers are much more okay to reach the same audience with those verticals. But at the same time, there's still that trust image of the entire group. So in a way, people get, both parties get what they want. And again, this allows me a way to kind of circumvent that problem, if you will.
No, it's incredible. I feel like how you've navigated that route and continue to stay, keep the DNA of the brand is fantastic. I mean, it's really impressive, because especially of all categories in content, news, politics is the hardest, it seems, overall. And it seems a lot of companies really struggle with this. And it's really impressive to see how you've kind of evolved and continue to evolve. And so kudos to you guys for doing that. This kind of already answers my next question. I only have a couple more questions left for you, Joey. But one of the things I'm just curious to get your feedback on, and just thoughts to wrap my head around, is it feels like news or political media maybe in these past couple of years, seem to have received a lot of heavy criticism, I would say. And that's maybe tax on media from political standpoints. Maybe that's polarizing politics. Maybe that's this weird sentiment of distrust. Has this affected your company at all? And how have you mitigated it? And I'm sure continuing to stay close to your brand and keeping to that DNA and about journalism has probably allowed you to push through that. But I'm just curious.
Yeah. So of course it's impacted us over the past couple of years, but I would say there's a pro and con to that. So just a bit of context. We started this company in Taiwan and in Hong Kong later because many of the existing legacy medias, be it the TV channels, the magazines, or the newspapers, are very infamous in this market for being incredibly politically biased to begin with. So there are probably, for example, 5 major TV channels, 5 major magazines, 5 major newspapers in Taiwan, and they're all extremely left or right or so-called blue or red or green, anti-China or pro-China, since there are a lot of political complications in this part of the market. So my joke to, I guess, international or American friends or investors are that just imagine, in the US you have Fox News, right? Just imagine in Taiwan or in Hong Kong or in this part of the Greater China, there are all different variations of Fox News. So I think what allowed us to grow very quickly during the initial few years was the original ideal, the original brand image was we wanted to go back to that simple sentence. This is digital first, independent, high quality content, no corporate agenda, no political bias. We're trying to be as fair and as objective as possible. So yes, so the pros and cons is, of course, when you pick no sides or where you're in the middle, whenever there's an election, whenever there's a controversial topic, yeah, both sides hate you. Because both sides feel like you're, the left think you're right, the right think you're left, and no matter how you try to balance this, it's never perfect. Because it's still very much down to editorial judgment sometimes. Sometimes people will ask us during an election, why did you criticize this candidate more? Why did you have less airtime to that candidate from that party more? It's not perfect, but I think after 7 years, the majority of our readers understand that it's an ongoing process, but we're very transparent in that we're not owned by anyone. We've never taken any money from any controversial investor, so we have no agenda. We have no pressure to do anything. And if you go to our websites, all of our investors are clearly labeled there, and they all have to sign a editorial independence statement that they will never interfere with whatever we're writing. So we're very transparent as we can be. But again, it's not perfect. But the good side about this is, so every time there's controversy, every time there's criticism on how biased the media is during different major events, the value of us and the readership for our group goes up. So there's that pros and cons there. It's that exact political tension in terms of media that gave birth to us in a way, and it gave us an opportunity to grow, to distinguish ourselves from our competitors. But at the same time, it's never perfect. You're never going to please everyone, and it's always a balancing act. It's just the same as everyone else, I would imagine.
Interesting. No, it definitely makes sense, and it feels like now in this day and age, yeah, you definitely have to. There's sides you inevitably have to pick, and there's no such thing as a neutral ground anymore. No, it's very interesting how you've navigated that. I have one last question for you before we close out. I'm just curious. I know it's impressive how you've built into a giant group now that's beyond just media, and you've gotten into data platforms and research, et cetera, and as well as advertising. But maybe just focusing on the content portion itself, where do you think the future of news-related content is going, and what do you see that most people don't?
I think, I guess, similar to society overall in general, in many ways, it is going to be more and more extreme in that, if you want to run a small, individually owned operation, be it, personal influencer, personal YouTuber, paid content, medium, writer, where it's a smaller scale, 10, 15 people, a small close-knit team, which is perfectly fine. Then yeah, I think there will be a lot of those teams, flourishing. And because the team is small and you have a big enough niche readership base to sustain you through either direct payments or advertisers in a big market, then yeah, those business models will survive. But if like us, from day one, the idea was to take institutional money, was to start from your home market and become international, pan-Asia, then it becomes very much a balancing act between your news and content ideals and how do you justify your valuation, taking money from investors, and eventually giving them a healthy return. So my long answer to your question is, so if you're taking this as a small, like mom and pop family owned business, then there will be more and more of these individual operators in, writing sports news, tech news, political news, international news. So there'll be more options for that. And that's the great thing about the internet. On the flip side, though, if you want to treat this as an organization, as a business, and you take outside money, then I think the future of this industry is that at some point, there will definitely be a conversion where, content plus platforms, plus tech services, plus data analytics, they will merge. They have to merge. Just look at what's going on in the U.S. The cable companies are buying the internet companies, are buying the telecom companies, are buying the movie companies, are buying the content companies, right? Apple 20 years ago was Apple Computer, and now they're going into hardware, cell phones, smartphones, and now they're launching iTunes, and now they're trying to do Apple Plus, buying a Hollywood studio maybe. So I think the future is definitely whoever has the overall brand, the content, whoever has the distribution platform, and whoever has the tech capability to actually organize and monetize all this data flying around. That will be, I think, the big play and the direction the future of the industry goes from a large corporate standpoint. So I think it will be two different extremes. Neither is necessarily good or bad. It's just, I think, how it's going to go going forward.
Really interesting. No, impressive insight. And I like how you are following that path too, about what you kind of foresee in the future as a company. With that, Joey, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for doing this. Before I close out, is there anything else that you wanted to share, announce, or have any asks of the audience?
Based on the past 7 years, we will continue going down that path of becoming hopefully a larger, more influential content plus tech service and data analytics platform. So we're looking to expand across Asia. We're looking into some potential deals in Southeast Asia or Japan or the US as well. So I guess to anyone in the audience, be it from an interested investor, we're always raising money for the next wave of acquisitions, for strategic partners or strategic investors to allow us to expand to the other geographical territories or outside of Greater China or Chinese language. We're also looking for strategic investors, partners, or even targets for us to potentially acquire that fits that narrative from a content and tech standpoint. So yeah, we're open. We're happy to meet new friends and discuss how we can create more win-win situations in the next few years. So please reach out to me if interested. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joey. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time. And why we had this conversation, we looked at well over 1,000 companies in the content category. And one of the companies that really stood out to us was the News Lens, especially within the news segment. How your approach not only to content, especially sticking what you mentioned to your DNA, but then also kind of evolving the content in a way that gives the audience a mix of both short form but quality content. It's kind of sticking to that through your entire history. And then also being able to see in the beginning how you've expanded outside of just news and politics into different verticals, and then beyond content and getting into other platforms that revolve around the entire ecosystem. How you built a news company from the beginning into where it is today is absolutely impressive. And no doubt definitely you are one of the best companies within this category. And it was an honor to have to feature you for this event. So thank you so much, Jeff.
Of course. Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you for your time.